Welcome to MSP Dispatch on April 26, 2022, your source for news, community events, and commentary in the MSP channel. Today, I'm joined by special co-host Stephen Murphy of Ninja RMM. How you doing, Stephen?
Very good today, Ray. How are you?
Good, man. Thanks for joining us. For those that don't know, why don't you give your background?
Certainly. So I'm a former MSP employee. I was head of managed services at an MSP for a decade, and then I transitioned to be over in the vendor space, joining Ninja One in the past month and a half, which has been an interesting transition.
Very cool. Going from MSP to the shady vendor side is I know all too well.
Yeah, I'm sure people have comments about that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But today's not about vendors. Today is about the community and events that drive the MSP channel. So let's get into the news. Our first story is about Hudu, IT documentation platform, client portal, and password manager. Favorite darling, I have several videos on our YouTube channel showing how to perform various items. As we've also been joined by uh, the CFO of Hudu, John. Previously, this weekend, it was reported by a Redditor on our sysadmin and also put out on our MSP that he found a way to access other client portal passwords. As long as a client was logged in, they could go to another client's passwords simply by guessing the slugs associated with it. In Now, the original post showing the exact methods for doing such were taken down nearly immediately by the mods of our sysadmin, as well as myself and our mods on our MSP. However, in an amazing display of vendor accountability, Hudu released an update within 24 hours. They released update 2.1.5.11, which addressed these exact items that were mentioned in the security notice. Stephen, bugs happen. That's the point of having a VDP, a vulnerability disclosure program, bug bounty programs. This went against the norm of what one might consider responsible disclosure. How do you feel about this kind of public disclosure where they not only gave what occurred, but the exact steps to replicate across public forums with thousands of users?
It's definitely becoming more and more common, but in terms of the actual release, getting it out there, getting it communicated, it's a great way to be. But there was no notification to the vendor themselves. Like you say, it's been an amazing turnaround by Hudu to get a fix out in 24 hours. From everything that I've seen, anyone who was a managed instance of theirs has been upgraded very quickly. They've been secured, and the self-hosted kind of set of instructions do say set this up on a rotation, upgrade it daily or weekly. So hopefully it should disappear very quickly. The downside of it being public, if it was a more exposed vulnerability, you would be looking at the situation where is someone keeping an eye on these subreddits? Are they actually actively monitoring for these kind of vulnerabilities being announced and therefore going to exploit them? As you well know, some of the information you store in Hudu is very detailed and potentially risky to a business, everything from passwords to one-time secrets, etc. In terms of the biggest kind of scare that you would have with this is if it was not behind this portal, it's out there on a public portal where you can get access without an authentication method, and there's no way to kind of restrict or prevent it.
Yeah, and this is one of the other issues that was surrounding this was that because you were able to get some of the passwords, though you were able to get some of the passwords, I believe, from Chrome's memory, there was no audit trail that went along to pulling the passwords as well. Again, Hudu did a famously wonderful job of updating all the hosted instances. We updated our own on-premises instance without too much fanfare. We did have some issues come up, but Hudu does have a presence in MSP Geek on their vendor channel v/v-Hudu, and their support answered quickly. We didn't even have to use the MSP Geek channel. If you're on premises still, make sure you update immediately. The self-hosted instructions at Hudu show exactly how to do so. And of course, their support is always available to help out. Now, Stephen, I'm going to take a hard stance on this. I mean, I'm always the guy screaming for vendor accountability. I'm screaming for, have your security.txt, your bug bounty program, your VDP. show good practices, protect the security researchers that are finding this stuff. This is the exact opposite, in my opinion. This was wanton and reckless, having putting this stuff out there. Thankfully, the potential access was minimal. I think it was due to Hudu's efforts. It could be fixed quickly. But I hate seeing this kind of public disclosure. Standard practice is what, 90 days for responsible disclosure?
Yeah, and even researchers will add time onto that if they know a fix is coming and it's only an extra 30, 60 days out. They will kind of stop that from going public and allow the vendor to get a fix out there.
Absolutely. And we have, we've submitted our own bugs, not to Hudu, to other vendors. And some were pretty decent severity. I mean, north of 8.5, and I think one of them was 9.2. Using the MITRE standards, and we submitted them, but we put them under embargo, and because we gave the vendor their 90 days, and they did release a patch within the 90 days. So if you want additional information on this, we did reach out to Jacob, the CEO of Hudu. He is going to be giving us additional information as far as background when they found out this occurred and exactly their response. Hudu has also vowed to get a third-party audit of their code. We will be sure to follow up on this story in future episodes, but the show notes will include links to all stories that we discuss. Into our next story, Krebs on security, back in the news again. This guy just keeps coming, story after story. They're on their game. And Lapsus, our favorite teenagers in the hacker world. This time they went after T-Mobile. They breached T-Mobile systems back in March. Krebs was provided with messages in their Telegram account that apparently occurred a week before the teenagers were arrested. They stole source code for multiple projects in T-Mobile, including access to their CRM systems and their provisioning systems. The source code could be used for SIM swaps and modification of other account records, which is always a security concern. Stephen, we've seen Lapsus go after Okta. We've seen them go after Microsoft, now T-Mobile. Is there any kind of rhyme or reason to the targets they're attacking? I mean, what do you see here when you're reading the tea leaves?
I'm seeing an escalation towards juicy targets that they can leverage to get elsewhere. Obviously, the T-Mobile leaning seems to be towards getting access to tools that allow SIM swaps. Again, if you had access to another platform or another system where they were behind multi-factor authentication using SMS text messages, being able to SIM swap and get your way past that authentication layer and into whatever platform they have behind it, it's an excellent way to kind of get into the hidden systems and the nitty gritty bits that we're not kind of used to seeing. Normally that protection would be kind of absolute. Your phone would say, right, you've got a text message, whatever the code is, and you just ignore it. They don't get past that barrier. Unfortunately, if you get SIM swapped, you would never know unless you miss an important phone call or a text didn't arrive that you were expecting.
That's the hard part, right? Qualifying the thing that didn't happen. And that's why any MSP worth their salt, anybody in security, and I hope at this point general public, they'll warn you, SMS is the absolute last option for MFA. I don't even like phone calls, honestly, the automated phone calls. Having with my experience in the telco arena, it is way too easy to take over a phone number. Is way too easy to redirect SMS messaging. You can take over SMS without taking over the voice calls, so you could do that. And like Steven's saying, you can receive calls and just not get text messages, and never know unless someone actually said something. Best practice is always push TOTP. FIDO tokens. There's always so many other options, or carrier pigeon, whatever you want to use. Just please, for the love of everything holy, stop using SMS. And getting into our last major story of today's dispatch, Elon Musk, the world's favorite billionaire, has finally submitted an offer that has been accepted by the Twitter board. There was a lot of back and forth, and we realized this doesn't exactly fall into most MSPs' arena as far as what they care about. This is important to us only because this is a platform that MSPs use to get information, that we use to get information. So Elon Musk has submitted an offer of $44 billion. That equates to, what does that equate to? About 7 Datto purchases, something along those lines. And the Twitter board did accept, despite all the fanfare of the poison pill and everything else. They did absolutely accept, and this looks like it's going to proceed. Stephen, we have a billionaire that likes his toys, and I don't know a better way to say this, right? Like, SpaceX is his toy, Tesla is his toy. He's brilliant, he's rich, he does all these amazing things, but at the end of the day, it does feel like he's just purchasing what's fun for him, and he definitely has fun on Twitter. What do you see here? What do you see as the importance, if any?
Ultimately, what changes? As with any acquisition, there's going to be a change of structure. There's going to be a change of rulings effectively on the ground. Will they stick with their current kind of community methodology for managing things? Does this open up the community to seeing people unbanned that have previously broken community guidelines, or does it go the opposite way? Do we see the end of the Elon crypto coin kind of slingers that are advertising and trying to scam people on every post he does? We don't know the ultimate kind of inclination as to why he's purchased it. I think only time will tell as to what direction they take.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we all dream of doing, right? When you have a platform that you really care about, and the MSP community is no different on this, where we've all had our pet projects that really mean a lot to us, right? CIPP is a perfect example, right? The Cyber Drain Improved Partner Portal that has so many fantastic contributors. Making a product that they need, and just building it. Obviously Kelvin spearheading it, but there are tons of amazing people working day and night on this to make it better. So, on one end, I understand it's a platform that Elon uses regularly, that he obviously, it matters to him and in his daily businesses. He uses it to his benefit to manipulate markets. The SEC's not, has gone after him a few times for the way he does so, including his late notices of his initial purchase of the $9 billion in stock, or the $3 billion in stock, the 9% of Twitter originally. But I so on one side, I understand it's something you appreciate, something you want to have control over. He feels there should be an edit button. He feels you should be able to delete tweets. He feels you should be able to restore some of the banned accounts. Not so much that he agrees with the people that were banned. It's more of a matter of free speech, getting those people back on. Whether or not you agree with it, the ability to manipulate a platform to the best way you see fit. I mean, that's something I think any of us would jump at that chance. But when it's a platform like Twitter that has the audience it has, I mean, we're not talking about manipulating a small newspaper. We're talking about like manipulating the New York Times. We're talking about manipulating basically the entire internet, good, bad, or otherwise. That's what Twitter is. Can you see any negative ramifications from this?
Certainly, depending on who gets unbanned, you could see it kind of decline in the quality of content, or a shift in the narrative to whatever they kind of start releasing content-wise. Ultimately, the interesting play on this is more the financial play, especially with the Twitter financial losses as of recent years. So how do you transition that multi-billion-pound purchase into profit down the line? Will we see more adverts? Will there be some sort of other method that they're using to acquire value out of that purchase?
Especially with somebody like Elon, who's known to draw outside the lines of the rules. So it will be interesting for sure, and we'll keep following. We definitely want to hear from you, our MSP audience. Is this interesting to you? Is this important? What are your thoughts? Leave comments in the video below, and click like and subscribe, of course. But if you have comments and feedback, email us, news@mspmedia.tv, and we will address it on the next episode, on Friday's episode. In our notable mention section, I wanted to bring up Insteon. Originally, I was not going to bring up this story. This occurred last week. Insteon sent out notice that they were going to be shutting down their services. Insteon, for those that don't know, they're one of the OG smart home platforms. They actually worked to create their own standards. That is not Zigbee and not some of the others. They have their own standards for communications. They have smart outlets. They have smart switches. About 40 or 50 of their devices are in my home right now because I was an early adopter of them. But they sent out notice that as of September of this year, they're going to be shutting down. That means all the devices that are connected to their smart services, so Alexa, Amazon, and so forth, or Alexa, Siri, all of that stuff is going to stop working with those services. The devices, as they're designed, do work with each other. So if you have interior control, if you're using one of their control units like the ISY 99i, those absolutely will continue to work internal to your household. Just there will be no internet connected services after September. Stephen, these are expensive little devices. Stuff comes and goes. I mean, you know, you run a major Slack based on you run a major group that's centered around Windows admins, right? Microsoft is probably the most notorious, just like Google, of build and kill, build and kill, build and kill. I mean, they're the serial killers of the technology realm. So we have to expect this, but at the same time, I know many AV installers that were building their business on tools like Insteon. And when you make a significant investment, I mean, my house, I'm probably 5 or 6 grand into it over the years in my house, and I don't have a huge house. I can only imagine a larger house using this. I could easily see this happening to MSPs too, right? They build their business on a certain service or product, and it goes away. How do you hedge your bets against that? How do you handle that?
In a hard way. If you ignore the kind of cloud and on-prem discussion, because that will just never end, we will be here all month, and we'll never get to a decision. But ultimately, the vendor support and being dropped is something that everyone is at risk at. Having a migration path and a time scale, excellent. You've got till September, and then a less critical element of the service does cease at that point. Being able to find an alternative, usually you do find with these kind of Internet of Things devices that there isn't an alternative to move to without purchasing a new control unit or a new unit completely to control the lighting or whatever element of the stack it is. Minimizing the risk, sticking with a healthy business, ensuring that you're not just kind of sticking with a small upstart who's kind of trying to get everyone out on the market at the low cost barrier. If they're more sustainable, at least we've got a chance of them remaining on the market.
That's the challenge, right? You have the giant players, you have the up and comers. The MSP world is no newcomer to that. I mean, we have some of our favorite products, Lifecycle Insights, one of my good friends, Alex and Marnie, and Jamie, and they have, they're not the they were not the incumbent. They came in and they created a space for themselves. And they're doing extremely well. I'm not trying to compare them to a service that shuts down, but that's the question, right? Like I was just having this conversation with Kelvin this week. He wants to do smart home stuff in his house, and he's looking at Philips Hue, not because it's maybe the best, definitely not because it's cheapest, but because it's Philips. It's not going away anytime soon.
On the other side, I had a Philips speaker that was Spotify based. They end of lifed it. It's not sold anymore. There's no updates, and it is effectively a brick. On the other side, didn't Sonos actually do the same very recently?
Yes.
A very, very big vendor, lots of profit in the business, and they end of life their speakers with very little notice, other than you can upgrade for a slight discount. Which is great, but also not what the vendor should be saying to the customer base when they're expecting a quality 10-year life scale out of the product.
TP-Link did the same thing also with another product. I believe it was a series of cameras that their V1 cameras had security issues, but they were not releasing any security fixes because the hardware couldn't support it. So their answer was, we're just not going to support the hardware anymore. You got to buy the V2 cameras. So
wow,
it happens. Yeah, and go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
And this kind of comes back to the point of, the nickname for Internet of Things. There are some famous Twitter accounts with some some different takes on how to describe that equipment. But when you come to it, having these separated off VLAN, secured on your own home network, it's kind of becoming a necessity because you don't know what they're built on. You don't know what the code is ultimately running. Is it a version from 10 years ago that's exploitable? Are you ever going to get an update of that? We just don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. Something along in this vein, we had reported on Friday, speaking of products that were getting sunsetted, Synchro MSP's backup product. They had sent out an email saying that their backup product was going to get sunsetted. Ian from Synchro MSP did reach out, and he is going to provide answers to a bunch of questions so we can report back. We're not going to cover it on this episode. I'm just covering it since it's in the line of services sunsetting. We'll cover it probably Friday if we get that information from Ian, or maybe an interview with him. So, on to our last story of the day. Speaking of, we talked on Friday about ConnectWise launching their IR services, their incident response services, and now we have Sophos. Sophos has purchased multi-vendor security alert vendor. That's a lot of vendors. SOC.OS, as reported by Channel Pro Network. Rich Freeman reports that they have purchased a SOC vendor called SOC.OS. This is not one that was on my radar. There's lots of SOC services. SOC is Security Operations Center. There's lots of these services out there in the MSP space. Throw a nickel and you'll hit 50 or 100 of them. But, Sophos, it makes sense. They have a very strong security stack going through the endpoint, going through DNS, going through the firewall. They have multi-tiered security products. This seems very much in line, but we're back to offering more services that sometimes MSPs or MSSPs are offering. Stephen, when the vendor is offering the services that the MSP may offer, we're not talking about should they, we're just talking about they do. I can see a play where the MSP may be concerned that maybe they're stepping on toes, or maybe there's an opportunity for the MSP to say, this is something we can offer we didn't offer before without having to worry about expertise. What's your take on this?
So I'll put my old MSP hat on and jump back to the days when I was an MSP. It's something I experienced myself, and one of the things that I always looked for when I was engaging with a vendor was effectively what's your code of conduct? What are you going to follow if something was to happen down the line? There are some vendors who are out there and saying they're channel only. They will only engage with the IT department or the MSPs in the market. They won't go direct to customers. Again, I can say internally that we kind of don't approach any MSP customers of our own. So we would never go and tackle them and say, right, you're a valid customer, therefore buy our service. It's bad business to kind of take that customer base away from those who are selling your services and are meant to be proponents of your service. Jumping back to the kind of news, it's definitely an interesting play. It's definitely one I'm seeing more and more on the market. And ultimately, I think that the shift to include security vendors as part of the stack, it's something the market's moving towards. It's something where we're jumping back to the value-added reseller market and model that was out there sort of 10 years ago. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out and how it's packaged.
Yeah, absolutely. And, maybe we'll see if we can get Scott Barlow or somebody else from Sophos to come and weigh in on what their plans were here. But it's definitely something interesting. If you're a Sophos user or considering using Sophos, let us know how this affects you, how this might affect your business, if you're looking at adding it to your stack, or if you're excited about the offering, or if you were already offering something. Leave it in the comments below, or hit us up with an email, news@mspmedia.tv, or hit us up on Twitter, and we'll be happy to respond. So we have community events coming up. These are the events coming up for the rest of the week. Lots of fun stuff. There's the Enterprise Summit over in Orlando, the Cybersecurity Roundtable with Nation State Hacking presented by ID Agent. We will have Tech Bar podcast in 2 days, the Family Feud episode, Dispatch, MSP Dispatch end of week wrap up on Friday, and Channel Pitch by the Channel program on Friday as well at 11 a.m. And we will include links to all of these if you're interested in attending one or all of them. We'll have it in the show notes below and on the podcast as well. Stephen, thank you so much for joining and co-hosting today. I really appreciate it. Your insights and commentary were insightful as always. So thank you, dude.
Not a problem, Ray. It's been lovely to be on.
Absolutely. And if Steven's everywhere, he's one of those that every community you possibly, whether it's geek or win admins or MRU or CIPP or any of the organization, Reddit, he's everywhere. So he's very easy to find. Until next time, thank you for joining the MSP Dispatch for April 26, 2022, your source for news, community events, and commentary in the MSP channel. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.